Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, this is Christine Collins, and today I'm going to share one of the most interesting questions that comes up when people are talking to me about hypnosis in the context of marketing, and also NLP, which stands for neuro-linguistic programming, in case you're not familiar. And what I run into really often in the entrepreneurial world is people who feel a massive distrust for some of these modalities and tools. And those aren't the only ones, there are others. But since those are some of the ones that I've been specifically trained in and therefore can speak to, I'm going to focus there. And here is the key of what I want to say today, and then I'll elaborate. When it comes to manipulative marketing, a marketer entering into the broadcast space to share out their content and their offers and using their conglomeration of marketing assets, and when they take on an approach that can be considered manipulative in that they are using specific types of language and tools in order to trick or confuse their audience rather than presenting things in a straightforward, factual, and consent-driven way, it is far less related to the specific tools than it is to their intention, and I'll explain why. So identifying the difference between a marketer who comes in with good intentions, they have a fabulous product or service, and they simply want to share that out to an audience who's interested in that product or service, versus someone who is actually trying to be manipulative. One of the key differences has to do with how that individual views their audience and their target market or their clients. It's not really about their abilities, their skills with language, with writing. It's not about what they've been trained in or their background and their modalities. It's far more to do with how they see that client, who that client is to them, what they mean to them, and their intention and philosophy about the relationship they want to have with that audience. And one of the key foundational principles that I think we can all adopt, which I have done, and it will heavily impact messaging, is that the client who's coming into our realm is sacred. The relationship with them is sacred, whether or not they are paying us money, whether or not they are giving up an email address, or they're just following us along on social media. It's an honor to have that person be a part of our audience. And the relationship we have with them is and should be sacred. And it is a sacred relationship based on trust. And when we understand that, we automatically start to craft our messaging in ways that honor the intrinsic and unshakable value of that relationship. So I call my clients the peeps. And when they come into working with me, it's kind of like they are coming under the giant wing of the raven in my logo, resting there for however long, and then going on about their lives. And the time that we spend together as practitioner and client is sacred. The respect that I hold for that person is forever because they have once been a part of that realm. So on the flip side of that philosophy that the client is sacred would be the view that some marketers may have that the client is in some way inferior. And a pain point dialing marketer can be identified with certain characteristics and traits that again are not related to a modality or a specific type of training that they may or may not have had. Now, there are some people who may unwittingly be using marketing tools that are manipulative and they can learn to do better. But when we're speaking about specifically manipulative marketers who don't care about the well-being and mental well-being of their clients and their audience, we are looking at the dark Tetrad personality traits. And so those four, in case you're not familiar with them, number 1 is narcissism. Number 2 is Machiavellianism. Number 3 is psychopathy. And number 4 is sadism. So narcissism is probably the most common, and that one has to do with having a very strong, inflated sense of self-importance. There is a lack of empathy for other people. They need to have attention. They need to have admiration. They need to have the focus be on them. And they have a sense of entitlement about what they think they deserve or are owed. The second one, Machiavellianism, has to do more with being manipulative inherently. They have kind of a cynical view of humans in general. And because of that, they have a willingness to exploit other people for their own gain. They may tend to prioritize their own interests over the well-being of others and over, in particular, any ethical considerations in their marketing or their habits. Then we have psychopathy, and this trait is marked by a total lack of empathy for others, just a complete inability to notice or care about the feelings and well-being of other people. There's also a tendency towards antisocial behavior. Now, antisocial, the word sometimes gets misconstrued. It is also a personality disorder. To speak about someone being antisocial, it doesn't mean that they don't like to socialize, just to clarify that. What it means is that they have a lack of regard for social mores and, in particular, empathy for other people and the capacity to understand in a social interpersonal context what is actually appropriate, and in terms of antisocial personality disorder in its most extreme form, can lead to very serious, dangerous, and violent behavior. It is arranged around a callous viewpoint, that lack of empathy, but also almost like they don't even know what they're doing is wrong, and a very manipulative style when it comes to their interpersonal relationships. There's also not necessarily a lot of emotional depth, and they may be more impulsive as a whole. Sadism is the last one, and this one is probably a bit more rare, but it does still exist, and it has to do with people who actually derive pleasure from harming other people, whether it's physical, psychological, pain. And they tend to be aggressive and even cruel in their behaviors towards others because they actually enjoy it and derive gratification from that. So again, that one is probably less common, but it does exist. And when you combine this dark tetrad of traits together into a person, you can end up seeing some very damaging and manipulative behavior. Now, that's not to say that every manipulative marketer out there has all four of these traits. They really only need to have one or two in order for them to fall into that category of being manipulative on purpose. And most of us have known or come across someone somewhere in our lives who fit into these descriptions. And it's also worth mentioning that someone could have a bad day or an off moment and display some of these traits, and that doesn't mean that that is their personality. So the problem becomes when it is a consistent and reliable part of their persona and who they are as an individual, and especially when their behavior is harmful towards other people. So I think a lot of times we may blame a tool or a skill set that is being used, but it's also very important to take a look at who is behind the marketing and the personality of that individual and what their intentions are. If someone is viewing their client and their audience as sacred and understanding that it is a sacred relationship of trust when they are sharing out their content, when they are sharing out their marketing, there is going to be a difference in the way that they approach their messaging compared to somebody who has some of these tetrad traits and who maybe just doesn't care as much in general about the well-being of other people. I know I'm always thinking about how things will land for others, worrying about whether I've said something that might be misconstrued or taken offensively or offending someone or harming someone or hurting their feelings. That's always in the back of my mind. And that's certainly not to say that I always get it right. But I think that it's very valuable that the intention is a consistent intention to do no harm, to create good feelings and joyfulness and love and light out into the world versus, in some of these personality traits where the individual actually enjoys doing harm, getting it over on someone else, pulling one over, getting away with something. Those are part of that collective of dark tetrad traits. And unfortunately, as we've talked about in other episodes, there is a dark side to the history of marketing. There are some components that are inherently problematic, where marketing itself has been taught in a manipulative way that showcases some of these traits, and some of the people who have originally designed the pain dialing marketing and those types of strategies, whether or not they were aware of how harmful those strategies were. So now we can kind of step into an awareness and to make sure that our own intentions in how we are viewing our clients and our audience is satiated with that respect, with that desire to build a trusting relationship, and viewing that client and that individual as sacred and the relationship as sacred. And in doing that, it goes a long way in preventing the mistrust and the manipulative marketing. So sometimes people will send me screenshots of things and say, is this hypnosis in marketing? Is this NLP? Are they using neuro-linguistic programming? And that conversation is really popular, and I definitely understand why. But I encourage you to reevaluate based upon some of the things we've just talked through today, and maybe remove the tool out of it, because it's very important to say this. Hypnosis and NLP and many of the other types of modalities and tools that exist out there were designed for healing. They were designed to help people transform difficult things. Hypnosis is an incredibly valuable tool when used therapeutically and appropriately. It can help someone to truly change things that have been pestering them for decades. It can help them to transform stories and beliefs in their mind that have almost destroyed them and have really caused a lot of harm. They can transform those things into more uplifting, positive, and constructive views and thought patterns. So it can be used in an incredibly powerful therapeutic way. And of course, it must not be used to manipulate others. And the same is true with NLP. It's incredibly therapeutic when used with a trustworthy practitioner, when used in a setting where there is a good client-practitioner trust, and when the practitioner's intentions are to help that person to transform into a better version of themselves, a happier version of themselves, and to be able to eliminate things that have been problems for that person. So the tool matters, but the person behind that tool, who's wielding that tool, matters very much. And I just encourage you to consider the person behind what you are seeing and thinking about and evaluating, because that is very critical. And that's not to say that every person who's out there doing crappy marketing has dark tetrad personality traits. They may also just be simply unaware. They were taught to do things a certain way and it's not good, but they're learning. So that has to be distinguished as well. So I think we can approach all of these topics in a more discerning way instead of drawing rash generalizations about what we're seeing, and dig into it a bit more, because that's really the only way to truly protect ourselves from the manipulative marketers, and to make sure that we are discerning as consumers, that we are paying attention to how we're thinking and feeling. And my last podcast episode was all about noticing the language in marketing and in various different messages that were being given, whether it's in the marketing realm or in our personal lives, with what people are saying to us and telling us. So being discerning and paying attention is the most powerful tool that we have. So I hope you found this interesting, and until we connect again, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at transformcreate.com.